Alright guys, so unless you don't watch any majors, tag meta has begun to drain a lot of people once again. When I say this, I'm not focusing exclusively on top performer opinions though. Reason being is that focusing only on their views I feel would be a huge disservice to anyone that plays not only this game, but any game competitively. So what do I mean by the meta has begun to drain people? Well, the game has become boring in a sense at a competitive level. Now let me define competitive so it doesn't sound like I'm contradicting myself. Competitive being at a level of being competent in the game, being able to adapt, lab things, and striving to get better as an overall player. With that out of the way, let's get back on track. At a competitive level, the game has begun descending into picking a top 10 character with a top 5 assist. And in the more common cases, just pick the top characters and call it a day. We know who these characters are: Mitsuru, Yuzu, Merkava, Ruby, and Batista. Now Walt and Taker are in this group too, but unlike the former, the latter two characters will mainly be seen working together on the same team. While Walt can stand on his own, of course, he's mostly known for one of, if not his best team, being that of Team Big Boys. The other 5 are good in their own right and can make virtually any character they're paired with scary overall. On top of this, these characters when paired together makes the situation much worse. I'll use Wallstein as an example. Wallstein is a top character, and I'll provide an example of how he can work as an engine for lower tier characters. Walt's moveset covers a lot of screen and can cancel out projectiles, all while making it easier for him to get close to his opponent, which is supposed to be where grapplers struggle. But because of being able to get close fairly easily and safely, combined with having the highest health pool in the game, you have a top tier character in the making. Here's an example using Yukiko. Off of his EX command grab, Yukiko can gain a lot of fire levels, and if she happens to get level 9 fire, she becomes a character, so to speak. This same thing can be applied to other characters such as Chie, only that with Chie the same concept would probably result in death because of how her power charge works in tandem with her Godfoot. You see, this is what happens when you have very strong characters that outshine everyone beneath. Now take this idea of an engine and apply it to every top 10 character in the game, as they're applied with whatever character the player really wants to play. The reason is that they enable the cast. Now there's nothing inherently wrong with this, but the problem just becomes when the top tier characters are paired with each other, it really becomes a completely different game. Not to say that the teams are unbeatable, rather that they're just very bland to fight against since the rest of the cast struggle against them very hard. So much so to the point that the phrase lost at character select has started to make a comeback. For me personally, I just become very bored when I see those characters on screen, because those characters are enabled so much and can legitimately do as they please. Be this due to boxes or frame data or sometimes both, it just becomes very boring to watch. Now this is just my perspective, however. I just find it very funny when it comes to certain things about how tag plays. For example, a lot of players complain that players of all skill levels need to stop using 5C, especially online because it's unreactable in net play. Meanwhile, these same people will wonder why people don't like playing against Mitsuru for the exact same reason, only Mitsuru's instant overhead is much faster and safer. It just seems kinda odd if you ask me. What I'm getting at is the game lacks diversity, as only 10 characters really seem viable. Sure, you can make the argument that the player makes the character, but until I see characters that the so-called top players deem bad are dominating various top 8s, that argument falls flat, and it falls flat very fast. Before someone jumps in the comments and says they're competitive and want the best chances for success, so why wouldn't they play the best characters? I am not saying that you cannot play the best characters. My problem lies in the balance of the game itself. Making it so that only a small pool of characters is viable is very poor balancing. Look at CF for example, or even Under Night. Both games have wildly different top 8s at almost every tournament, compared to Tag where every top 8 is dominated by a number of Mitsuru, Yuzu, Ruby, Batista, and now Merkava team. It just begins to pull the amount of interest in the game down very quickly. This is no different from when Team Scythe was running rampant. If you tuned in to watch a tournament and the only characters you saw every single time was the exact same ones over and over again, you begin to look less and less. Which brings me to the title of today's video, the state of Tag before 2.0. Tag is in a peculiar state because of the sense of the overbearing top tier characters, while at the same time it has a lot of hype building because of the 9 characters that are coming very soon. Which even after the EVO announcements has begun to drive people away once again, because aside from the character problem, the game has become very two-touch as well. Meaning that the damage output in the game is very high, especially for the top tier characters, which only adds to the point of how the meta has become very shifted to only playing the top tier characters. I mean, if you were playing someone like Izayoi or Lene for example, you're not killing anyone in 1 or 2 hits. Compared to Akihiko, who only needs 1 or maybe 2 hits to kill you to win the game, especially if one of those confirms is off of a DP punish or a burst punish. Now before I go any further, I'm going to recommend watching Core A Gaming's video on why we should buff more than we should nerf. The reason is because while under normal circumstances I would agree with him, when it comes to cross-tag battle, I have to disagree with him here. You see, aside from the absurd damage that the top tiers put out and the top 10 characters overall, every character feels viable in one way or another. But when you compare the current state of the game, there is no real reason to play the bottom 20 characters in the game at all, which is really saying a lot since at the making of this video, we have 44 characters in the game with 9 more on the way. What this means is we will soon have a game with over 50 characters, but when it comes to tournament top 8s, we will still see about the same 10 to 15 characters because if a character isn't OP, nobody wants to play them. At least no one you'll see on any main stage at any major. Personally, when I see a unique team at a major, I'm hyped, but at the same time I have a feeling of dread looming over me. Because if a team of, say, Noelle and Makoto is on screen, the chance of that team winning are slim to none if they're going up against the likes of Mitsuru and Yuzu. But I'm getting off topic here. The reason I reference Corey Gaming's video is because in his video he makes the argument buffs are okay because it makes the game more fun to watch. In the times we live in with esports, this statement doesn't quite fit. You see, fighting games are no longer something that people stumble upon by accident en masse anymore. More often than not, people who watch or play fighting games know what they're looking for. As such, making an OP character even more OP for the sake of views isn't going to do anything in the long run for the game's longevity. I say this because at the beginning of this video, as I said, tag has begun to go back to its normal state, where keeping one lobby full is the best that you can expect. Compare this coming off the Evo announcement or a patch when you'll see 2 or 3 or maybe even 4 lobbies being used. Personally, I say every character is viable in some way if you remove the top 10 characters from the equation. I'm not calling to ban 10 characters, that would be absurd. What I'm saying though is that if you bring the top 10 characters down to reality, the game becomes much healthier. You see, buffing every character to keep up with just 10 characters specifically will create an arms race I don't think anyone would enjoy. Because all it takes is escalating moves consistently before we descend into Mugen territory. And we already have characters like Akihiko that can loop on his own and do 10k solo. Do we really need this to be any worse? Or rather, do we really need other characters capable of doing the same thing? You see, one of the complaints that Crosstag got when it first released was games being over very fast. So much so that the game is best of 5 instead of best of 3. Cranking the damage scale up to 15, making it so other characters can dish it out as well, isn't the solution. Stabilizing the game, on the other hand, seems to be the best way to go, at least in the vein so the game isn't just enjoyable if you're winning. So it is my hope that 2.0 does fix this power gap in the tiers and make it so that we can watch tournaments and not see the exact same teams over and over again. Now, if you're asking me how would I go about balancing the game, I would say make sure you subscribe so that way you know when I make the videos addressing that very question, you'll be able to see my very hot takes. So thank you for everyone who watched the video to the end. Let me know where you stand on this issue. Does tag need buffs or nerfs, or do you think it needs a little bit of both? Let's talk in the comments below.